right to repair. It is a question coming to the Massachusetts ballot in November aimed at making sure that repair shops can get access to the same information as dealers to be able to fix cars. But today, both sides on this question came together with an unusual message for voters. Never mind. Our business editor, Peter Howe, is here to explain. And Peter, please explain this one.
Thanks, Mike. It is a very unusual situation where after the deadline for getting the question on the ballot, both sides came to an agreement on a compromise plan aimed at preempting question one. But because of a pesky thing called the Massachusetts Constitution, it will still be there on November 6th. And if it wins a yes vote, which very well could happen, that could make things very complicated. They have spent thousands of hours battling each other over right to repair, legislation to ensure repair shops get the same information as car dealers to fix vehicles. It's coming to Massachusetts voters as question one on the ballot in November. But today, these longtime combatants and legislators had one message on question one: never mind.
We crafted a good bill here. You really don't have to participate in this referendum.
Not widely known, at the close of last session, legislators unanimously adopted a compromise right to repair law to preempt question one.
Through the legislature's work, they were able to come up with a law that we're completely happy with.
But despite that compromise, question one will still be on the ballot. Secretary of State Bill Galvin says that's unavoidably mandated by the state constitution.
It's all a matter of timing. The constitutional provision that allows the ballot question had a deadline of July the 3rd.
The compromise was 28 days late, and very likely question one still wins. Now, this question of what happens if voters ignore the compromise plan that legislators adopted and go ahead and vote through question one, that's a serious question because a recent poll by Suffolk University and WHDH found 79% of Massachusetts voters inclined to back question one, a number that's very hard to knock down no matter how much never mind advertising you run. What that probably means, legislators replace question one with their version.
The bill that we've crafted together with all parties' input is the better bill and best serves the interests of the public.
This is only a law, and the legislature always retains the right to change a law. The voters have the right to vote on it. The voters will vote on it. Their decision will be final, subject to the legislature changing it.
Now, what are the differences between the compromise plan that the legislature adopted and question one that'll be on the ballot? It's a lot of very technical things, but one of the key differences, the compromise plan would give car makers 3 extra years until 2018 to figure out how to comply technologically, make sure that the computer diagnostic codes that are so critical to fixing just about anything on a car these days, make sure your local repair shop can see those codes just like a dealer can. Mike?
So, Peter, just to be clear on this, the two sides in this who don't want this to pass, who have already agreed on a compromise, want us all to vote no?
Well, it's a great question. I would say the car makers absolutely want you to vote no. The Right to Repair Coalition, I asked them that today, and they said we're never going to say vote no on this, but what they want you to know as you go into the voting box is there's another plan on there already that they're perfectly happy with. I think probably both sides would be very happy if a lot of people just skipped the question and it didn't wind up going to either a yes or a no.
All right, we'll see what happens. We'll be watching this one on election night. Peter, thanks.
Lee and Mary Lou Johnson were on their way from Oregon to Europe for a cruise down the Danube when they stopped here in Boston to visit their daughter and her family. Right away, Heather Klisch knew that her father wasn't well.
He was kind of strangely foggy. He was falling out of chairs. He would sit down in a chair and miss it. He would go upstairs when he went to go downstairs. So something was telling us this is very wrong.
Johnson went to the emergency room at Mass General, where he was diagnosed with glioblastoma, the same kind of brain cancer that killed Ted Kennedy. But Johnson's prognosis may have been even worse.
His crossed both hemispheres of his brain, and the doctors were very consistent in telling us this is inoperable.
Johnson was treated with radiation and chemotherapy, but he was already planning his next move.
We were in the hospital, and he first did say, well, we've got to get back to Oregon, so I have access to this Oregon option.
The Oregon option is that state's Death with Dignity Act. It allows adults who've been diagnosed with a terminal illness to get medication that they can use to end their life. Johnson returned to Oregon in late December.
He knew he wanted to go about dying with grace. How would he treat people? How would he spend his time? And interwoven with all of that was trying to figure out for himself what was that line, what was living and dying with dignity.
When her father's condition worsened, Klisch flew out to be with him. The next day, he announced he was ready to die.
He took a drink of water and he laid back and he said, "Okay, I'm ready to go." And I said, "Dad, no, that wasn't that drink." And he said, "Well, it's time to get that drink."
After triple-checking his intentions, Johnson's family contacted the end-of-life group Compassion and Choices. A volunteer came to the house and prepared a lethal dose of the drug Seconal, while Johnson and his family said goodbye.
We sat in the den where the bed was and just talked. And it was actually strangely nice. He was funny even at the end, and his last thing that he wanted to eat was a piece of toast with raspberry jam, because he loved raspberry jam, and he just completely enjoyed it.
Then, a few minutes later, Johnson reached for the cup.
He took the drink in his hands and drank it. It was very fast. Then he, I would say within minutes, appeared to have fallen asleep, but what happens is that he slips into a coma. And I would say it was about 10 or 15 minutes until he died, until his pulse stopped. And the volunteer was very discreet. She was in another room, and she was the one who came and checked his pulse and told us when he had gone. It was very peaceful.
Critics argue that for the terminally ill, hospice care is enough. And Heather Klisch admits that end-of-life suicide isn't right for everybody.
But for someone like my dad, it was right. And someone for like my mom. I mean, my mom, when he died, my mom was in his arms. Her one hope was that when he died, he would know who she was and know that she loved him. And so it was planned. It was planned, and it worked out that way.
With all the financial pressures on medical decision-making and all the talk about how expensive the last year of life is medically, it is just naive to think that we could establish a medical benefit that costs $100 and not have that exert pressure on treatment decisions. People must remember that they can refuse any and all treatment. What we are talking about here is asking doctors, insurers, hospitals, and the state to get involved in suicide recommendations. The state should not be in the business of ensuring that suicides succeed, especially when years and months of people's lives will be lost. This issue is about fear. The issue is about fear of being cared for, fear of disabling conditions, fear of losing control of bodily functions, fear of being an emotional and financial burden on family members. To talk about choice as an isolated event that occurs outside of all social relationships is very naive. How can it be a choice if insurers or medical providers can say no, we will not fund that treatment? That's not a choice. It's not a choice to die when someone told you incorrectly that you are dying. People already have the choice. What this does is bring the state in, it brings insurers in, and it brings policymakers in. Let's keep choice with the individual and not make it a state policy that sometimes it's better to be dead than alive.
My name is Lorraine Kurz, and I am from Greenfield, Massachusetts. It's not like someone who is feeling a little bit sick. This is non-stop throwing up for days on end, and he was having trouble controlling that, as well as keeping any food down, so he was losing weight pretty rapidly. He had tried Marinol, which is something that they suggested, and that was not as effective for him. That didn't work for my son, but the medical marijuana actually did work. My son, at the age of 29, had to face his own mortality. I can't imagine how difficult that was for him on a day-to-day basis. His anxiety levels were pretty high initially. Once he started using the medical marijuana, they were a little bit easier for him to control, and he actually had a much better quality of life because of it. I think it's a horrific thing to watch your child suffer like that, and ultimately to have to help them face the end of their life. But I think it would have been just so much more horrific had he not had something to help alleviate some of those symptoms. I would say to voters to vote yes on number 3 because it helps with quality of life for many people who are sick. There are a lot of medications that have much heavier side effects than medical marijuana, which we didn't really see any bad side effects with, and that it could help to improve the quality of life or pain control or other things that help people to maintain their independence for as long as possible.
There's a reason why the American Medical Association, the American Cancer Society, the National Multiple Sclerosis Association, and other organizations oppose this idea of smoked marijuana as medicine. I'm Dr. Kevin Sabet, and I served with Presidents Bush, Obama, and Clinton in drug policy matters. And I'm very concerned about the upcoming initiative as well to legalize marijuana as a so-called medicine. As the Massachusetts Medical Society has said, smoked marijuana has not passed through the FDA procedures to determine what a medicine is. Instead, smoking marijuana is like smoking opium to get the effects of morphine. We know that marijuana has medical effects, and there are already medications available on the market that come from marijuana. In the future, there will be more. The federal government is undertaking a $15 million research program to determine what elements within the plant of marijuana can be a future drug approved by the FDA. But for now, we're left with political campaigns and, frankly, a lot of hyperbole about what the effects of smoked marijuana as medicine are. It's not good public policy to legalize marijuana as medicine, and it's not good medicine as well. Vote no on the upcoming initiative and join medical societies and organizations from around the country and around the Commonwealth who are doing the same.